Hey, Thomas, hey, we're back.
We're
We're
back.
back, man. And I like to just thank everyone again. Welcome to another episode of Inside Out Exploring the Roads to Redemption. I'm the proud co host of this unique podcast. I am Dr. Lawrence, and I am the proud executive director and founder of A Bridge of Light, where we focus on enabling underserved communities to acquire human needs, but we have a particular focus on disrupting the school of prison pipeline and further enabling the reentry of formerly incarcerated persons. And it's my honor and pleasure, it's really my honor and pleasure to introduce to you our brother and friend, Mr. Thomas Cotton.
Welcome, everybody. I'm also the co-host of this amazing podcast, and we're just grateful to have all you guys join us. I'm the founder and CEO of Redemption and Advancement Alliance, where our mission is to disrupt the cycles of incarceration by helping the specific the part of that process, the person, help them to overcome barriers, help them to see what life looks like in a different way, but also partner with amazing people like Dr. Lawrence and seeing what we can do to bridge these gaps that people face.
Excellent. Excellent. I love how you mentioned you're not necessarily focused on the system or the community, you're focused on the person. The most important part of any community is the person. And here in Inside Out, we explore the road to redemption of potential obstacles that the justice impacted person may encounter when trying to enter society. And Thomas and I have explored that topic as far as the justice impacted person, justice impacted communities. And Thomas, can you just give us a little soundbite of what a justice impacted person is for those who are just joining us tonight and justice impacted community?
Well, there's a lot of people that want to know what is the difference between justice impacted and justice involved. A justice involved person is a person that's been arrested that gets involved with the system. A justice impacted person can be that person as well as their families, the communities, and everyone who's impacted by this incarceration or the justice system. So the justice impacted person doesn't necessarily have the experience with being arrested, but because of all the crime or whatever is going on in their community, it impacts them in a certain way.
Excellent, excellent. And Thomas and I we had a wonderful opportunity to meet each other, to first meet each other at Morehouse School of Medicine's MAGIC program, which stands for the Masters in Administration, Justice Involved Care. And we have so many similarities, yet differences, but so many similarities which attracted us to do this work for this podcast. So with that, please like, share, subscribe, and engage because our purpose here is not necessarily to answer all the questions, but to stimulate thought, so you could go back and possibly engage us, so we can have a different perspective on the problems in which we face. Today,
You mentioned
yeah, go ahead.
real quick, you mentioned the MAGIC program. That's where we met. And one of the things about us, you and I, we're thought leaders in this space. But when you ask people to get involved, we know we're not the only thought leaders in this space. We know that it's important to bring others along. So as we continue with this podcast, we know that we're leaders in the space that we're at. We have motivated many to do a lot of work. We've informed different spaces, but we want others to be a part of that information. We know that there's so many people out there that have great insight to the topics that we're talking about. So please chime in. Maybe one day we can have you on the show so that we can continue this conversation in a deeper way.
Excellent, excellent. And today we're going to face with that chiming in. Today we're going to just discuss a unique topic, but a very needed topic and a needed action in our communities as we face just overwhelming effects of violence, various forms of violence. And Thomas and I were talking earlier today about community-based violence intervention that can facilitate disruption and facilitate prevention. And the base of that, as he and I were discussing, was just a concept community-based participatory research, which is a collaborative approach between researchers and the community that they serve to further have a greater understanding, not necessarily a sympathy, but an empathy with the work as they go into underserved communities, unique cultures, and so forth. So, community-based participatory research is aimed at combining knowledge and action to create a positive and long-lasting, that's the huge piece. Not just the quick fix, but how do we form a relationship? Researchers and those that they're serving form a relationship that facilitate transformation and long-lasting social change in the community they face. So, there. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when we talk about intervention and prevention and community based, let's talk about what intervention is. Intervention is the action and programs and strategies that are usually implemented after something happens. Right. So it's there to resolve whatever is happening in a minute. It's a mitigating factor toward that. Right. And so it happens after the fact. Prevention is something that's proactive. It's designed to stop a problem or an issue before it happens. Right. Now, a lot of times you can say, well, how do you prevent something before it happens? Because you see something emerging. You see the risk that emerges from something. You see a school to prison pipeline, so to speak. We talk about that often. And if you know that the school to prison pipeline is in place and that it's literally leading people down a road that's going to send them to some type of carceral system, put in some preventative measures to limit the risk so that those outcomes are changed and transformed. So we just want to be clear on when we say, prevention and intervention of violence. There's different types of violence that we're going to talk about, but there's different ways of intervening in violence and preventing violence.
Excellent. And, just as we spoke about earlier, Thomas, a way to see in the future with preemption is to listen. Is to listen to the community in which you're serving. Don't come in with the answer. Maybe come in with a model. Then, based on what you're hearing from the community that you serve, be prepared to be flexible and enable that model to be fixed on top of the environment in which you're serving. But just the beautiful part of community-based violence intervention is you're recognizing the community. You're recognizing the community for what they have, and they have the knowledge because they've been affected by it. And what you want to do as a person that's trying to facilitate community intervention, violence intervention, is to build on the strengths of the community, build on the strengths, promote co-learning. Like our big thing at A Bridge to Light is let us learn together. Let us learn together. I don't care what credentials you have or don't have. How do we learn together to have a more complete understanding of the problem? And again, how are we taking a step-by-step process based on us listening to address a particular problem in the community? That's the sum of and community-based participatory research or violence intervention is much broader than that. But in this 20 minutes, we just want to, again, stimulate discussion, stimulate thought. And how do you hear this information, then go back and research it and further enable a community-based approach in your community? I know, Thomas, you've been working on a few things with respect to this community-based a community-based approach in various environments. We'd like to share with our audience some of your actions.
Yeah, so there's quite a few ways that we can see violence in our communities, and the impact in our communities. It's within our families, it's the emotional, it's the social, it's the economic violence on individuals. And so a lot of times we see the outcomes of violence. We see the issues. We don't look at the root, though. And a lot of times to find the root cause of fatherless problems or economic problems or social problems, it's getting to the people who have the most lived experience and listening to their stories and hearing what they have to say. It's beginning to set systems and structures in place that allow us to hear. So when we talk about community-based participatory research, then that means this is the research we're going to do is based in what the community says. I've sat on a board for Morehouse School of Medicine's Prevention Research Center for about 12 years now. I was a part of the community-based participatory research cohort at the University of Michigan back in 2017. And I began to see how a lot of times we miss the opportunities to really make significant impact because we don't bring the loudest voice to the table. And that is the people who are experiencing these things. So the Morehouse School of Medicine's Prevention Research Center, all their research is directed by a community-based board, and it's a community coalition board. And the community coalition board is empowered to say yes or no to any type of research that they want to do, and to help guide and to bring the voice of the communities that they're going to serve and this research is going to impact. Some of the good things about this CBPR model that we have is that when the research is done, it's disseminated within a year or two. A lot of times research is not disseminated once you do the studies, you find out all the information, it doesn't get back to the communities for 7+ years. Well, by 7+ years, that research is no longer relevant to the community issues. So imagine 7 years ago, a study was done in a community. Well, in that last 7 years, we went through COVID, we went through so many other things. And so when we're talking about impact of violence, COVID changed the way violence looks a lot of times. It changes the way we've seen how our economy is and everything else. So any research prior to COVID may not be relevant to today. And so it's important that we get back into the community. We start to hear directly how the issues in the community are being affected by COVID or whatever social or environmental things that are out there. So we have to really, CBPR puts us boots on the ground to be able to hear these things.
Excellent. Excellent. Listen, I don't know of many podcasts speaking on a consistent basis what Inside Out is doing. We're attempting to bring just unique aspects of violence, unique aspects of the challenges those face, the obstacles they face, reentering society, formerly incarcerated persons. So we encourage you to like, share, subscribe, and engage. And also, just a huge shout out to Morehouse School of Medicine's Magic Department for really taking the emphasis to illuminating the social justice and health inequities that not only the justice impacted and involved people face, but just those who are underserved and underrepresented face throughout the United States and the world. And you brought something up that was very key and different: COVID violence. Violence. And that will be an interesting. Yes, we understand the physical and psychological and possibly sexual violence that occurs in any environment, but the deprivation and maldevelopment piece, when we spoke to a COVID environment and the violence associated with that, would be a huge, understanding of what role violence plays in our communities. And speaking of that, just community-based violence intervention, and we being former students and graduates of the Morehouse School of Medicine's MAGIC program, we took a keen focus on the social determinants of health. And you and I spoke earlier today that silence does not necessarily mean that that there's no violence being portrayed in a particularly violent environment, physically violent environment, because of the impact that violence can have on education, jobs, occupation, healthcare, one's social environment, physical environment. So just because you don't see the violence, or hear the violence, does not mean that the violence is not taking place. Mm-hmm. And this is something that community-based violence intervention, they can tell you that jobs are still bad, The physical environment is still bad. The infrastructure in which we live in is still bad. We still have rodent issues and healthcare issues. Just because guns are not going off here, they're going off. So they're going off somewhere else. And you spoke to that issue in a plain way earlier today, and I just like you to share that with the group, Thomas, if you can.
Yeah. So when we think about the silence of violence, I'm a rapper and didn't even know it. See, there's silence of violence. We need to talk about that. But the
Yeah.
silence of violence, a lot of times we don't hear about things. We don't hear about how inflation is really impacting the marginalized communities that we serve. But, silence can be used as a way of listening. It can be a way of de-escalation, but it also can perpetuate the violence because we begin to ignore issues. We ignore root causes of things. We forget that people are impacted by situations a lot differently.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it looks like our society is back in the full swing of everything, there's a hidden group of people that are suffering because of just the way our communities and everything are going. So we can look at complicity. Like when you have silence, there's complicity in something. There's indifference. I just don't really care about it. So when we have silence in the face of injustice and abuse or violence that can be interpreted as apathy or acceptance, it emboldens perpetrators to continue doing what they're doing and discourages victims from seeking the help that they can get because they don't know where to find it. And anytime that if there's this apathy or this complicity or indifference, anytime someone reaches out for help and they feel this, then they're going to stop reaching for help. They're not going to feel as if they're going to be accepted or find the help that they need. So when desperate times call for desperate measures, the people that are most impacted by this silence will start to do things that most of society will look at and say, well, they're just the worst of the worst. But in reality, all of us have needs that need to be met.
Yeah.
We talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and all these other things, but the reality is we can't allow silence to make us complicit or indifferent toward the violence that's happening toward groups of people.
Right. Wow. But as you mentioned, having a community-based approach for participatory research and or violence intervention with the vision, with the intent on disrupting and or one day preventing violence in a particular area. That's just utilizing that community-based piece is important. But there are some challenges sometimes. There are some challenges with, although community-based approach is very, very effective when done correctly. There could be cultural issues, cross-cultural issues that the researcher may not understand, and they're not listening. They come in with like a predisposed understanding and refuse to abandon that,
Right.
to accept, to listen to the community that's being involved. There's lack of collaboration again, so that facilitates a lack of collaboration, and or people may have different methodologies that may clash. So one thing as a problem solver, the first step in problem solving is what problem are we trying to solve?
Right.
For example, you are in a location, I'm in a location, we understand gun violence is an issue. So if we don't discuss what gun violence is and the root causes of that, we already start off at a disadvantage. We already start off at conflict when we're trying to do good. We're trying to do good, but we're at conflict with each other before we start even the discussion. If we do not have a clear definition and come to a consensus to what the definition opposed to your definition and my definition, and the collision happens. And,
Yep.
and if I'm so emotionally driven by my position versus principle, if I want my position to be heard so much that I refuse to listen and get to the position at which the principle which we're trying to achieve, that could be a hindrance to the community-based approach to participatory research and or violence intervention.
Yes. Many years ago, 1997, I'm in the midst of changing my life and changing the way I do things, still in prison at the time. And I heard this saying, try to understand rather than be understood. Try to understand rather than be understood. And I wrote it down on a piece of paper, this piece of paper.
Uh-oh.
This is a paper from 1997. If I flip it over, it still has I think it's some kind of menu or something from prison you can see in there, or a kite or something like that. It's something, cover sheet or something. But it was something I wrote down in prison. Try to understand rather than be understood. This thing has been with me for, 2024, 27 years, right? I've had that piece of paper. And the reason why, it goes back to what you were saying right now. If we're not able to have this open communication and trying to understand what people are going through, we have to have this alternative way of looking at things. We have to have active listening dialogue.
Yes,
Open communication fosters and helps people to understand what collaboration looks like. It helps us to address the root causes of violence. So as you use the example that we both know there's gun violence in our communities, but what's addressing the root causes? Is the gun violence that's similar in our communities? Are the root causes exactly the same thing also? Can we look at that and can we talk to people from our communities and find out what's specific to our community and how we can address these things?
exactly.
And then it allows us to advocate. It allows us to bring awareness and bringing in these campaigns. And these campaigns are informed not by what we think is going to solve. We're not going to come in and save the day. It's informed by the people who are directly impacted by these things. It allows storytelling to happen. It allows education. It allows the mobilization of resources. And then we start to see how we're preventing violence and how we're intervening in violence and these types of things. But if we're missing the voice of those closest to the issues, if academic people or academia is coming in and saying, hey, we need to research your community, we need to do this, and we think this, and this is what's going to help the community, but it's uninformed, then that research is garbage.
That's right.
Pure garbage.
That's right. That's right. And and as we spoke earlier, Thomas, far too often the easy button is hit with respect to complex problems. As I said in earlier shows, we got to stop giving simple answers to complex problems. And those simple answers are usually the symptom of a greater problem, which supports the root cause. The symptom is kind of just dangling out there, and it's easy to grab at. And it's something that, quite frankly, the political determinants of health, the ones that are funding things and supporting things, and so you know what? Great, perfect. Yeah, we all agree on that, opposed to getting down to a more systemic or cultural or national issue that may be particularly embarrassing. So we'll treat the symptom, but with getting down to the root cause, where's dark at? A lot of people don't want to do that. So that's a challenge that we have to force ourselves. We have to force ourselves as members and as invited guests to community-based approaches. To continue to ask the question, drive down, keep on going deeper and deeper till you can't go any deeper. And then from there, what resources do we have available to further enable us in a sustainable and realistic manner to address the problems that we face as close to the root cause as possible, but identifying the root cause. I'll tell you, this is a great show, man. This is a great show.
I just want to final thought. Involving residents in decision making and conflict resolution. If we do that and we continue to involve the rest, people who are directly impacted, community and everything, we have a shared sense of responsibility at that point. And to me, that shared sense of responsibility leads to a shared responsibility in reducing violence.
Yeah.
And I think the communities will thrive better when the silence is balanced with voices that are advocating for justice, they're advocating for equity and advocating for peace. When you begin to have community involved in all these things and they see where their hands fit, even those who have previously been a part of the violence now can find their way to a place of peace. I guarantee you one thing that everybody on this podcast, listening to this podcast, one thing that everybody is seeking, and that's peace.
That's right.
Every single person wants peace. So let's make that avenue open for people to receive this peace. And as they start to see this peace, they become stronger and more effective leaders in their communities.
Wow. Perfectly said. Perfectly said, man. I tell you, tonight we just wanted to just challenge you, and come, share, subscribe, engage. Let us know how you feel about community-based approaches. And tonight, just to recap some of the things we spoke about. Community-based participatory research or community-based approach has some advantages and some challenges. However, as long as we are open with the challenges, I believe we could get beyond the challenges quickly. And community-based participatory research, and just that field has set the conditions or a proper environment or model to further enable violence prevention, violence intervention efforts, which could further enable the disruption and, in a perfect world, prevention. So with that, this is the end of the year. And I would just like to say at the end of the year, that the days are a little bit colder, the days are a little bit darker, and we may take on some feelings of depression, of sadness, of anger, because of seasonal pressures. I will ask that everyone just give someone a call. Give someone a call just to check on everybody, because we all are not too big just to say hello to someone or just check on them. We want to bring attention to seasonal affective disorder, which can affect one's ability to operate efficiently and effectively during the months of November through February. So with that, Thomas and I, we really appreciate you tuning in for these months to join us for Inside Out, exploring the roads to redemption. Thomas, you have any last words before we close out, sir?
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking off what you just said. If you're having any crisis or seasonal challenges mentally, emotionally, call 988 from your cell phones. 988 is a hotline that you can reach out to somebody, and they're always answering. So if you can't reach somebody who's close to you and talk, call 988.
Yes, brother. And I think in the spirit of this show, it's the community-based show. A Bridge of Light, we always say everyone and everything is a resource. Everyone and everything is a resource. You can't discount anybody. Everybody has access, and everybody has a perspective that could possibly be useful for the problem you're trying to solve. It takes a network of progression to defeat a network of oppression. So let's make the net work.
And at Redemption Advancement Alliance, we want to say happy holidays, Merry Christmas. For us, we understand that as long as a person has a heartbeat, there's an opportunity for redemption. So never give up on people who are around you. Never give up on yourself. As long as you have a heartbeat, you can change. Things can transform. Your world can be totally different.
Thank you. Have a great holiday season, and good night.
Good night.